Surah 106. Quraysh. Context. Period of revelation. A great majority of the commentators are agreed that it is Meccan. And a manifest evidence of this are the words, Lord of this house, Rabb al-Bayt, of this surah itself. The historical background to this surah. To understand the surah well, it is essential that one should keep the historical background relevant to the contents of this surah, and, of Surah 105, al-Fil, in view. The tribe of Quraysh was scattered throughout Arabian Peninsula, Hijaz, until the time of Qusay bin Kilab, the ancestor of the Prophet. First of all, Qusay gathered it in Mecca, and this tribe was able to gain authority over the Kaaba. On that very basis, Qusay was called Mujami, uniter, assembler, by his people. This man by his wisdom, founded a city-state in Mecca and made excellent arrangements for the welfare of the pilgrims coming from all over Arabia, with the result, that the Quraysh were able to gain great influence among the Arabian tribes and lands. After Qusay, the offices of the state of Mecca were divided between his sons, Abd Manaf, and Abd ad-Dar, but of the two Abd Manaf gained greater fame even during his father's lifetime, and was held in high esteem throughout Arabia. Abd Manaf had four sons, Hashim, Abd Shams, al-Muttalib, and Nawfal. Of these, Hashim, father of Abdul-Muttalib, and grandfather of the Prophet, first conceived the idea to take part in the trade that passed between the eastern countries and Syria and Egypt through Arabia, and also to purchase the necessities of life for the Arabians, so that the tribes living by the trade route bought these from them, and the merchants living in the interior of the country were attracted to the market of Mecca. This was the time when the Sasanian kingdom of Persia had captured the international trade that was carried out between the northern lands and the eastern countries, and Byzantine Empire through the Persian Gulf. This had boosted up the trade activity on the trade route leading from southern Arabia to Syria, and Egypt along the Red Sea coast. As against the other Arabian caravans, the Quraysh had the advantage that the tribes on the route held them in high esteem. On account of their being keepers of the Kaaba, they stood indebted to them for the great generosity with which the Quraysh treated them in the Hajj season. That is why the Quraysh felt no fear that their caravans would be robbed or harmed anywhere on the way. The tribes on the way did not even charge them the heavy transit taxes that they demanded from the other caravans. Hashim, taking advantage of this, prepared the trade scheme and made his three brothers partners in it. Thus, Hashim obtained trade privileges from the Ghassanid king of Syria, Abd Shams from the Negus, al-Muttalib from the Yemeni nobles, and Nawfal from the governments of Iraq and Iran, and their trade began to flourish. That is how the four brothers became famous as traders, and began to be called Ashab al-Ilaf, generators of love and affection, on account of their friendly relations with the tribes and states of the surrounding lands. Because of their business relations with Syria, Egypt, Iraq, Persia, Yemen, and Abyssinia, the Quraysh came across such opportunities, and their direct contact with the culture and civilization of different countries so enhanced the level of their knowledge and wisdom, that no tribe in Arabia could match and equal them. As regards wealth and worldly goods, they became the most affluent tribe, and Mecca became the most important commercial center of the Arabian Peninsula. Another great advantage that accrued from these international relations was that they brought from Iraq, tile script, which later was used for writing down the Quran. No other Arabian tribe could boast of so many literate people as Quraysh. For these very reasons, the Prophet said, "Quraysh are the leaders of men," as narrated by Musnad Ahmed. And according to a hadith from Ali, in Bayhaqi, the Prophet said, "First the leadership of the Arabians was in the hands of the people of Himyar. Then God withdrew it from them and gave it to Quraysh." The Quraysh were thus prospering and flourishing when the event of Abraha's invasion of Mecca took place. Had Abraha, at that time, succeeded in taking this holy city and destroying the Kaaba, the glory and renown of not only the Quraysh but of the Kaaba itself would have faded away. The belief of the pre-Islamic Arabia that the house indeed was God's house would have been shattered, and the high esteem in which Quraysh were held, for being keepers of the house throughout the country, would have been tarnished. Then, after the Abyssinian advance to Mecca, the Byzantium also would have taken the initiative to gain control over the trade route between Syria and Mecca, and the Quraysh would have been reduced to a plight worse than that in which they were involved before Qusay bin Kilab. But when God showed this manifestation of his power, that the swarms of birds destroyed 60,000 Abyssinian troops brought by Abraha by pelting them with stones, and from Mecca to Yemen, they went on falling and dying by the wayside, the faith of the Arabs that the Kaaba indeed was God's house increased manifold, and the glory and renown of Quraysh too was enhanced considerably throughout the country. Now the Arabs were convinced that they were under God's special favor. Therefore they visited every part of Arabia fearlessly, and passed through every land with their trade caravans unharmed. No one could dare touch them with an evil intention. Not to speak of touching them, even if they had a non-Quraysh under their protection, he too was allowed to pass unharmed. The theme and substance. As all this was well known in the time of the Prophet's appointment to prophethood, there was no need to mention them. That is why in the 4 brief sentences of this surah, Quraysh were simply asked to consider,
when you yourselves acknowledge this house, the Kaaba, to be God's house and not of the idols, and when you fully well know that it is God alone who has granted you peace by virtue of this house, made your trade and commerce flourish and saving you from destitution, favored you with prosperity, you should then worship and serve him alone.
Surah 106. Quraysh. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. For the accustomed security of the Quraysh, their accustomed security, in the caravan of winter and summer. Let them worship the Lord of this house, who has fed them, saving them from hunger, and made them safe, saving them from fear.